I often get people asking me what it would cost to get a one-bedroom apartment or a one-bedroom house, something very small and approachable, somewhere in the Leon City area most likely, probably with air conditioning. There's a pretty standard thing that a lot of Americans and Canadians and others are looking for when moving to a new country, especially if you're approaching retirement, maybe moving here on your own, you're a single or a couple, and you don't need a lot of space, you've downsized, and especially if you're living out of luggage, then getting something really small and affordable is definitely the smart thing to do. And yet, the answer to this question is awfully hard. Why is that? Why would it be so difficult to come up with a general price, and what is the price, and how do you find this really obvious type of housing that everyone is looking for? Well, we're going to get to why that is, what it is, and all the things you need to know about that right after the bump. All right, I'm Scott Allen Miller, and this is my life living in Nicaragua. As a starting point, this is just a lot of people are looking for this. I totally understand why people ask this question all the time and why it seems like it should be a really obvious thing. And it should be for so many reasons. And yet it's a really big challenge for a lot of people. Whether you're looking online, you haven't been to Nicaragua yet, or you're actually here and you're searching around and you're like, I need to talk to Scott because I can't find this thing that I want and it's becoming a real problem. You're probably going to run into this at some point. Now, some of you are coming down with big families and you don't care about one-bedroom apartments, but a lot of people really want this, and yeah, we got to talk about it because it's really confusing. It is a gorgeous day. As I'm recording this, I am outside enjoying some beautiful weather, some gorgeous sunlight. As the sun goes down, the air feels just perfect. The bougainvilleas are just blossoming. I love the look of this season. The deep pinks and purples that we get here against the lush green of Nicaragua is just fantastic. And I was watching one of my videos that I filmed yesterday, and I was just in love with how it looked. I'm like, boy, Nicaragua is beautiful, and sometimes I miss it when I'm just standing there, but because I make the show, sometimes I get to look at it. Before we get into today's topic, I got a couple little housekeeping things I just want to make sure I hit. One, remember on Thursdays, we do a live stream most afternoons. It's awesome if you guys get on there, love it. Two, if you guys would like to send in video questions, I love putting you guys on the show. Everything you need to know about how to send in a question or comment to the show, right down in the show notes. Please go do that. That is fantastic. Three, many of you know Marcela, who helps with the show, my producer, is going through chemotherapy for stage 4 Hodgkin's lymphoma. There is a GoFundMe. The links for that is in the show notes, and we are looking to raise a total of $5,000. We are almost exactly half that at this time, at like dollars short of $2,500 in total. What it shows on GoFundMe is really confusing because it only shows some of what's been given and only some of the goal. So it shows about the right percentage, but in the wrong way. It's very confusing. The point is, we're still looking to raise money to help her as a single mom, taking care of her kids and dealing with a lot of travel. Her health care is provided by the country of Nicaragua, so that part's great. She's only needs about $5,000 for 2 years of, just things that happen around being a cancer patient. We hope that should be all that is needed. If you want to support the show or anything, everything's in the show notes. You don't need me to tell you about it, but definitely if you want to say hello, you want to ask a question, you don't feel like sending in a video, but please do anyway, or you just want to say hi, go down and say hi in the message area below. We love getting communications from you guys. Okay, so really clearly, a one-bedroom is a popular thing. Let's start with what is available pretty broadly. What we generally can find, and I realize that people are generally pretty flexible, and this doesn't actually require you to be around Leon. We say Leon because that's where I am, and a lot of people have questions about that, but this is equal in all of the country except Managua. Managua, being the big city, many times larger than Leon, the second biggest city, does have some things on the market that no one else does. So can you find a one-bedroom apartment there with air conditioning? Yes, I think you can. It will be very hard to find, but it's out there. I have not seen one. I would love, woo, that was a lot of wind. I would love to go do an episode where we go look at a few of them and put them on the show. What a great idea. Thank you for mentioning that. Like, I can mentally, we just connected. Right, that would be great. If I can find a way to do that, absolutely I will. If any of you are aware of a place or have one that's like that you'd like us to put on the show, definitely we will get out and do that. And I do know some of you are waiting for me to come and film your houses and stuff, but no one has anything like this that people are specifically looking for. But we try to get these things on the show whenever we can. But in the rest of the country, you're basically looking at these things not existing. And it should go without saying, but I realize some of you do not watch all of my episodes. Shame on you. That San Juan del Sur does have a completely different market, and there's a lot of things available there and a lot of things not available there that is the opposite or just different than the rest of the country. So yes, in San Juan del Sur, specifically far away from everything else, if that's where you want to be, you're probably not going to run into a big problem on this, but in the rest of the country, you are. San Juan del Sur being completely a different animal in its housing market more than anything. Housing and restaurants completely different there. And nightlife, I suppose. Okay. So what you can generally find in most of the cities is rentals that are 2-bedroom, 1-bath, almost always houses, standalone. The idea of shared building apartments, relatively rare here. Not unheard of, not terrible, just not very popular. It's not how people approach things here for whatever reason, mostly because of multi-generational homes where family piles in. They like to use their yard. They have to maximize the way that they live, and standalone houses just tend to work better for that. People don't want to have HOAs and things like that. When you have a shared building, one way or another, you got to have something of that nature. So people shy away from that for the most part. So you're just not going to find very many on the market, but a few. I have one, so certainly they exist. Now, the one I have, one of the things that I note quite often is that when you do encounter a rare apartment, they're often built much like they're a house. So the apartment that I have is essentially a standard Nicaraguan 2-bedroom, 1-bath house in nearly every aspect. It is the same general layout. Marcela, who's been on the show that we talked about just a minute ago, she had a house in Ciudad Sandino that we have shown a little bit on the show some time ago, and that house was exactly what you would get from a pretty standard apartment here as well. All it was, they had 2 walls that didn't have windows, and they only had windows front to back on the house, which is a little bit odd, and there's a lot of reasons why I don't think that was a good design, because it was a standalone house with a lot of yard around it. There was room on every side to have windows and a lot more airflow, which is something you definitely want here, but that's not how they did it. But the apartment that we have is exactly the same. Front and back windows, airflow from front to back or back to front, and all the sides are closed off, even the ones that could have windows. I think that's a miss, but that's the way that they've done it. So quite often, the way that you find apartments here and the way that you find houses here they're basically the same units, just whether they have a shared wall or not, which is a little bit odd because when you think of an apartment, you generally think of a different layout, taking advantage of a different construction technique or approach. And here, that's really not how they're doing that. Or it may be more that when they're building houses of this nature, they're actually taking an apartment approach and breaking it apart. It's kind of somewhere in the middle, I think. But importantly, Nicaraguans almost never want 1-bedroom or studio-style houses. I realize those are 2 things, studio and or 1-bedroom. They want things that are at least 2-bedroom, and they generally want 3 or more because they almost always are only getting a private place when they're moving out from home, and they're normally doing that because they're getting married and trying to start a family. If you're just getting married and not starting a family, you'll probably live with your parents or grandparents. If you are younger than that, you're gonna stay at home. If you are a lot older, you're probably moving back in with your kids or whatever. There's a lot of family living together, and so you want multiple bedrooms, and the market for the 1-bedroom is not a traditional thing so much. Now in Managua, there are a lot of young professionals who move to the city, and some of them make quite a bit more money than they would in more traditional jobs, right? It's easy for, let's say, a call center or an engineer or a doctor to move to Managua because they're looking for opportunity, and they may make 50 to 100% more than the kinds of jobs that their counterparts of the same age would be making back in the country where they came from, a smaller city or a village. And so when they get to Managua, they have a little bit of extra spending money, and they don't have their family local buy them, and so they need to have a place, but they don't need very much space. And so you do find some amount of market for those people to get upgraded spaces, but most of the people like that end up just going for the smallest of other houses, and so they find 2-bedroom, 1-bath houses to be quite comfortable in many cases, and then they have a storage room or an office or a guest room as well as their own bedroom. So you can see why that would work out, especially given how affordable things are. Once you're in a position where you're looking to do that, getting that second bedroom is so cheap that people often do, because you'd have to give up so much space to go down to a 1-bedroom that many people just don't bother, or it isn't very practical, because if you as a landlord are going to put a unit on the market, having 2 bedrooms is just way more flexible, and so that's the way people tend to go. So the whole one-bedroom concept is just incredibly rare. Now, I have encountered them here in Sutiava, but when we have encountered them, they tend to be very entry-level apartments, much more basic than even the entry-level houses that we normally talk about. And so they're often quite small and quite bare, leaving them in generally a condition where if you were someone who is looking to move to Nicaragua and you're coming with some amount of budget, often they're going to be below what you're actually looking for and not very adequate from a stylistic perspective. It's also worth mentioning that student housing does exist. Here in Leon, student housing is a relatively big thing because of all the universities, so we have a big market for that. And student housing generally is like a studio that does not have a kitchen, so it's almost like a tiny private hostel room. Just a tiny bed, a tiny desk, barely enough room to move around, just enough window to cool down the room, but your own tiny private bathroom. I did have an office that was in one of these. If you go to some of my old videos from 2022, when we lived in Laborio, which was nearly all, we moved in late, like January 23rd, and we moved out like at the end of November. So we only put in just a little bit less than a year in that house, but I did a lot of filming there. That was the first year that we never missed a day, and I show the house itself at different times, but I also show the next door student housing that we rented the entire complex and used them as our own offices. And so Paul and I had our own offices over there, which was really nice, completely set up as an office instead of as a bedroom. It worked really well, but if I had to live in there and do my schoolwork and studying in there, I would have been pretty cramped. But you can see it, I show it a bit because it's really useful as a example of what kind of student housing does exist. Now, of course, you could potentially go for student housing if you're on an incredible budget and you do want to be able to explore, you have very few things, and you want to be able to travel a lot and not spend any money on where you are staying. Well, that's an option. Those, we can talk about pricing. Typically, those are going to cap out at about $100 per month, and they could go as low, I think, as about $50, with realistically, generally here in Leon, you're going to be seeing about $75 up to $100. But those can be quite comfortable. You would not have air conditioning with that. So you would typically either need to live without air conditioning or you would need to add it, and not very many student housing locations are going to be happy with you adding it, but just ask and you may get lucky. But it could be very low cost if you really don't need the space, if you are okay with a really small bed and you don't need to work and you're, it really is just a place to sleep and nothing more. Well, it could be a very affordable option. Very few Americans and Canadians are going to be okay with that incredibly small space. I really want to be clear about that, but there's no reason you couldn't do it. Student apartments do not have a kitchen, so it's very important to understand that you will not be able to store food. You will not be able to do anything as far as cooking, except for maybe you'll have like a shared kitchen area outside. I've seen that, and then it's kind of like dorm living in a hostel. So if that works for you, great. If you're someone who wants to go out and eat all the time, or you're going to be traveling all the time, having a kitchen in your own house could be a waste of space and money. So understandably, this could work for someone, but I can't stress enough what an extreme tiny space this would be, and I don't think very many people would want to. If you do manage to convince someone to let you put in a split unit, and to be fair, we did. We had 4 of these units during 2022. Paul and I each had an office in one that we put full split unit air conditionings into, which was great because you would turn it on and 30 seconds later, your entire office was nice and cool. We also had big windows. It was a very comfortable office space. It worked incredibly well. And with that huge split unit for such a tiny room, boom, crazy efficient, cost nothing to cool. We also had 2 more rooms that we used as guest housing. So if we had, for example, in the videos where Kat comes and stays with us from the United States, she was there for like a month. She lived out of one of those rooms and it was completely adequate for her. She didn't have to work. She was there on basically vacation, so she just had her own space to live in, and it worked really, really well. She was comfortable. She had her own complete entrance to the house. She didn't need to come through to us, and so student housing was really nice for her. But also she was able to come over and use the main house, so it was a little bit more comfortable for her than it would be for someone who was living solely out of that. She was able to store a little bit of stuff in the house. It was more like a private bedroom that was just outside and around another entrance rather than being a complete living unit. So it's an important perspective, but it can work and they can be quite useful. So worth considering in an extreme circumstance. In general, though, you're going to be looking for something larger, and it's going to be very hard to find. It is also very important to understand that while student housing you expect is not going to have air conditioning, nearly nothing that you're going to find is going to have air conditioning, at least at the time that you rent it. You're quite often allowed to add your own air conditioning. But if you're looking for a place that is only one bedroom, you are going to eliminate most affordable options because they're simply not going to be things that only have one bedroom. And if you are looking for something that has air conditioning provided or already included, you're going to eliminate almost everything on the market. And so if you search for an air-conditioned one-bedroom, because this is what was asked of me and I get asked this a lot, then basically there's very little chance that you will ever find an option, let alone a good one in the spot that you want. In all of Leon, I am unaware of a single unit like this existing. Now, someone hopefully will write in and tell us where one exists, but it will definitely be an anomaly and a very special case, and someone's going to snatch it up. But I'm literally, having lived in Nicaragua for so many years, I have never seen one of these units in any situation anywhere except for where we rented it and put in the air conditioning. And of course, when we left, we took the air conditioning with us, so it would not count for someone who is searching for that. So this is all very important as a perspective. When you're coming and searching for a place, certainly don't rule those out. If you were to stumble on one and it's the right thing for you, fantastic. But much more likely, what you need to do is be looking for something larger and accept that prices here are quite low. And so getting 2 bedrooms instead of 1, getting something without air conditioning and adding it may be exactly what you want to do. So this takes us from this incredibly unlikely 1-bedroom air-conditioned situation to the incredibly normal 2-bedroom, 1-bath, unair conditioned, non-air conditioned. But the cost of air conditioning for example, my apartment that we have, straight up, right? Our rent is $180 a month. That is very, very affordable for most people. It is a very comfortable, nice apartment. There's no reason not to use that instead of a 1-bedroom. Then you have a little bit of storage, you have a guest room, blah, blah, blah. Adding in air conditioning, if you want to air condition the whole place, we put in 2 air conditioning units. They cost about $450 each. You just need little ones. And then you have to install them. So you're looking at probably in the $800 per unit range. If you are alone, if you are only planning on having 1 bedroom, if you have no interest in the 2nd bedroom, or you want to use it purely for storage, just close the door, don't air condition that room, don't install an air conditioning in there, and don't worry about it, and you're good to go. Just air condition the room that you're going to be in. Or what we did is we made 1 a master and 1 a guest, so we can use it in lots of flexible ways, and each has an air conditioner. 1 almost never gets used. But if we want to air condition the entire apartment, we just open the bedroom doors, turn on both air conditioning units. Both rooms get quite cold, and it keeps the living room and kitchen at very comfortable temperatures as well. When it's really warm, we have to hook up a fan to cycle the air around a little bit. That is it. It is a very comfortable, easy, approachable, flexible scenario. And yeah, if you're renting for only 3 months, it's going to be really complicated, or you just have to live without air conditioning. But if you're renting for any length of time, the cost of installing the air conditioning, and remember, you get to take the air conditioning with you when you go. And if you stay in a place for a long time, then that air conditioning is going to be a nominal investment. That $800 for 1 year feels like a lot, because that's pushing towards $70 a month just to have air conditioning in the place. And of course, you own the units, but yeah, so that feels really expensive. But if you stay for 2 years, suddenly that's only $35 a month. And if you stay for 3 years, then it's getting really, really nice. You're barely over $20 per month for that air conditioning. And then still, when you move somewhere else, you get to take it with you. So it's not a lost investment completely. So it really is a good approach. And that's what a lot of people here do, because air conditioning is so rare. And of course, in much of the country, you may not need air conditioning. Consider that it could be acceptable to do without that. If you're here in Leon, probably going to want air conditioning. I totally get you. But if you're up in Matagalpa, Esteli, Jinotega, Nueva Segovia, somewhere, any of those kinds of places, there's a really good chance you could do without air conditioning. And honestly, even lots of Managua and San Juan del Sur and Carazo are cool enough that you might be able to go without air conditioning. Granada and Masaya, I would want air conditioning almost certainly. So you're going to vary depending on where you are in the country, but the option does exist for some people. So that is why we find that 1 bedrooms simply don't exist. and why, if you're looking for that, you really should be looking for 2 bedrooms and not air conditioned. Be a little bit more flexible in the style of what you're looking for, and you'll have a much better opportunity of encountering something that's going to be good for you. And like I said, I have a really nice 2-bedroom in a nice community that I really like. We're very happy with that apartment, and we keep it for guests and stuff when they come to visit us. And at $180 a month, it's hard to really compete with that. Yes, in theory, you can get a 1-bedroom in the same barrio for $120, and that is a big savings as a percentage, but it doesn't have the flexibility. It is much smaller. It is not just the same space with the rooms combined. It is half the space. Very, very hard to come by, but we have encountered those in the past. But generally, you're living next door to people who are paying week to week kind of thing on little tiny apartments. So it may not be the same kind of place that you want to be. Whereas we're surrounded by our neighbors are all investors in the area and professors and things like that, because it's near schools and such. But so at $180 for a really nice, comfortable place, and certainly you can find cheaper ones out there, it quickly becomes hard to justify trying to get a place that is dramatically cheaper. There's very little wiggle room in those prices. Once someone is taking the time to collect the rent, taking the time to maintain the property, and certain things don't change, right? The kitchen's going to be the same size, the bathroom's going to be the same size, the living room, you're probably going to want something. Unless you go down to that student housing, there's just this base amount, and having that extra bedroom costs almost nothing for a landlord to provide. And so if you have that flexibility of a mental state to accept that, oh yeah, 2 bedrooms may work and be fine, and I'm still paying so little, then you're going to have just a much better time. And I totally understand where this comes from. In the United States, if you're going to an apartment complex, I grew up in the United States. I've lived in so many apartment buildings, and when you go to an apartment complex, you go in and they have the 1-bedroom model, the 2-bedroom model, the 3-bedroom model, and it's a big complex, and they price them out mostly by the square footage changes that happen and the number of people that are going to be living there. And there's generally more bathrooms and different things that happen when you have those extra rooms. And so, now this is a long time ago, but a 1-bedroom might be $700, and a 2-bedroom $1,000, and a 3-bedroom might be $1,200 or $1,300, and you'd really save a lot of money if you didn't get extra bedrooms that you weren't going to use or you weren't sure you were going to use. You'd want to save that money. But here you might literally be talking $10 or $20 savings maximum per month for getting a lot of size reduction. And that's just not likely to make a lot of financial sense, even though, yes, you don't want to spend money where you don't need to, but it's really probably marginal. So that is that's the picture. And I think you'll all find it's still going to be very challenging. Finding real estate here, whether it's to rent or to own, is always very difficult. That is one of the biggest challenges in Nicaragua. I totally understand. But having some of this underpinnings of why the market is the way it is, what to expect, what to actually look for in a practical sense, you'll have a much better time and get much better results. Thank you for joining me. Like and subscribe. Tell a friend about the show. Share on social media. Don't forget to buy me a coffee if you want to help support the show and the work that we do here. Consider joining the channel. And of course, get down those show notes and send in your questions, please. And I hope to see you guys on Thursday afternoon, evening-ish for our live stream. It's a lot of fun. And bring your questions. It's a great time to connect with me and the audience, and everyone gets to talk to each other, and it's really great. And of course, we have our WhatsApp Expats group, also linked in the show notes. Everything's in there. I will see all of you tomorrow.